Hello, everybody. Hello to my fellow Blender nerds, um, 3D aficionados, character artists, my kindred spirits in that way. Hello and welcome to week 3 of this class. It's been good catching up with you guys in the pre-stream chat. Been as talkative as always. Real quick, there's a question from Marjoline, if I wanted some feedback on my sculpt's progress, would uploading a Sketchfab viewer thingy be the best way, or should I post some screenshots? I would say that the expectation is screenshots, so maybe at least screenshots, but if you're willing to export your model, upload it to Sketchfab, and then embed that, that's going to be the best way to view your model since we can look at it from all angles. But yeah, hope that just got that quick question out of the way. So yeah, welcome to week 3. This is focused on production-friendly character models. And we'll get into the nitty-gritty of that. But first, I want to get into week 2 and recapping week 2. So what I like to do is give a shout out to my favorite homework submission from the week and also some honorable mentions. And Malholmesy, your one-legged Pete is pretty great. A lot of loves on that submission, and I mean, there's very little to not love about it, if anything at all. So really, really great work. I wanted to highlight how accurate and authentic the representation was, the 3D translation was from the 2D art. You also picked really good 2D art, one that struck me as like, yeah, this will look awesome in 3D. And you've done that. And even though it is very authentic, and no one would doubt that this 3D sculpture was based on this 2D artwork. There you did take some artistic liberties, and I think that's good. Like you mentioned in your post, I think that your artistic style ended up inevitably coming out, and I think that's great. It is your own spin on it, but you still remained very authentic, and that I just like that. I guess that it's fun to take your own artistic liberties, and some people deviate a lot from the art. But I come from more of a professional experience, and I just get a bigger kick out of taking a really inspirational 2D art and try and make it as authentic as possible. And you've done that, so I wanted to commend you. And then, an awesome rendering to top it off. You got a nice light setup, really presented your model well. And yeah, just this served to be the exact purpose of a concept sculpture, where if we're imagining me as like contracting you to do this work, or if I'm like a director, I would have fallen in love with the art, and giving that to you, I would want to see the essence of that art in the 3D form. And this did that, compared to doing a neutral T pose or A pose or something like that, where I would have to, okay, it does sort of look like the same character. There's no doubt seeing it in pose and this quality of sculpture that, yeah, this is exactly what I wanted from the 2D art. So really, really good job from this week's assignment. Really good stuff. And then honorable mentions, Matthew Allray, who makes it again into some shout outs. He's doing a really good job this month. He did the Ulbricht Vunter. I think that's how you might have pronounced that. But it's this Viking character. And what was interesting about this one is you might remember that he was my favorite caricature from last week. And he, when he posted this artwork, if I was completely honest, I was like, you set the bar so high with the caricature that this artwork was kind of like, okay, it's maybe a little less interesting than what I would have given you if I were doing that. But but it's like, if you're passionate about it, like, go for it. That's the most important thing. And then you posted this concept sculpt, and I'm like, this is better than the artwork, in my opinion. Like, you filled in gaps that capitalized on the art and made it better. And that's not something I feel like I see very often. Usually you see great artwork that doesn't quite end up as great in 3D, or at best like a one-to-one translation, so it looks as good as the art. But rarely do I see a 3D sculpture end up better than the art, in my opinion. And that's what you've done. I love that you changed the pose, right? You gave him this like hysterical laughter with like a hand up in the air, and that's better than the more neutral thing in the artwork. The additional details, or maybe just fleshing out the implied details, like the fur in the boots, the strands in the beard. All of this is like sort of implied in the art, but you really went for it in the sculpture, and that makes it better. You filled in like what this belt should be, where you did not have that much information in the artwork. So you pushed it further than I think the art was prepared to go, and it's better for it. So really good job with that. And then also I wanted to call out Hans Christian Gross. And this submission is definitely a work in progress, which I don't typically choose or for this, just because there's more work to do. But this one really stuck out to me, and there wasn't a name, so I'm just calling it the Chainsaw Chick. But I really see a lot of potential in this. I see that you're being very authentic to the art, and again, that's kind of in this class. That's maybe one of the easiest things the most obvious things to like commend is when we have a really good artwork. It's really inspirational. It's super cool. She's got a lot of personality, and then you match that super closely in the 3D. That gets me most excited. It's we have a standard to judge it by in a way, and so you're doing really good with that. I see a lot of potential. The silhouette seems to match almost 100%. The legs look really, really good. Chainsaw positioning and block in looks really good. I just see a lot of potential with this, and I like that you're being so authentic. Very curious to see what this ends up like. I hope you do finish it, so that again, this character is one that when I saw it, I was like, yeah, this will look awesome in 3D. And you're doing that, and I just would love to see you finish it. So please stay diligent with that, and keep up the good work. But overall, all the submissions were quite good. I don't think I gave below a B this week. So, I mean, that's awesome. Those are really good grades, and see a lot of good work happening from all of you guys and girls. So thanks for those submissions, and thanks for the backgrounds too. It was really fun seeing your personality come through, some of your mind that I wouldn't normally see. A lot of the stories like emphasize parts of the character, made sense why the character looked a certain way or was in a certain pose. And I hope that was a good exercise for you. Fun to get into the world of the characters that we're building. And thanks for those submissions. That was a lot of fun reading this week. So keep up the good work, everybody. At the end of this, we're halfway done, and at the end of this month, I think we'll have some pretty sick characters to share with the world. And keep it up. Finally, the last thing that I wanted to touch on, and I feel like I saw some of this in the submissions, but I definitely ran into it when I was sculpting my character, and it's the concept of when 2D concept art fails in 3D. Fail is maybe an extreme term. When 2D doesn't translate into 3D, and how, as artists, we need to cope with that and learn how to roll with those punches. So in order to do that, I wanted to share where my concept art or my sculpture was at. So let me switch over to Blender real quick. See if I have any, alliteration. Apparently I was saying a lot of words that had the same beginning letter, and I didn't realize that. Maybe I should make that more intentional and speak in alliteration more often. Awesome. One more reminder, I don't see any question marks, but if you do have a question, please try and prefix the question with a all caps like question, and then your actual question. It makes it a little easier for me to spot for now until we can build a better system for asking questions in the chat. But that would be very helpful. So I don't see any question except the practice of the prefix over there from Char. Thank you for that. All right, so yeah, my character, I have to admit that I did not use my time as wisely as I should have, and I did not quite finish my concept sculpt. You can tell there's no bunny mask whatsoever, and the man purse is undercooked. It's just blocked in. I have a lot more work to do on the actual bag itself. So at best, I guess I would have given myself like a B for not being able to finish it. So what kind of teacher am I to not even be able to keep up with the assignment? So my apologies for that, but I do like how it's turning out. I had a lot of fun with this character, and it just was fun. I felt inspired throughout the whole process and feel like it's turning out pretty well. But I wanted to talk about some areas where I could not make it match the artwork and it looked natural in 3D. And probably the biggest one is in the head. So as we're aware, this character, well, there's some debate a little bit, but I landed on this character being a human character wearing a fox mask. Some people said it could be the other way around, which that's fine. I landed on the former way, and I love that about the character. I love that feature of the character. It looks so, the mask looks so involved and spliced with the face, like just being a part of the face. And that's a really powerful feature. And I wanted to be as authentic as possible with that. And I first started out by sculpting everything as one piece, mask and head and hair and all of it. But as I started to match the artwork, I realized that the jaw was missing. Like there wasn't enough room for the jaw when I stayed authentic to the art. And so then I decided to separate the mask from the face. And if I hide that, I ended up sculpting the face as a symmetrical object, to get the ears for free and get all the features on the opposite side for free due to symmetry. And so I sculpted this face. Here's John Donne, identity revealed. So like, I guess consider yourself special for seeing this. But when I sculpted the face, it just kind of kept it generic. I realized that if you look in the art as I go on and off, that the jaw reaches far below. It actually eclipses the arm right here. And so it's reaching below the arm, and there's not enough room in the drawn mask for that jaw. And so I had to make an executive decision to cut off the mask where the jawline is, kind of make it coincide with the jawline. And this did change the design of the mask, but maybe some opinions if you guys think it works out. I mean, I think I like the solution I came up with, but trying to maintain the feeling of the art, but make a little more sense in 3D. Also, you'll notice in the art that the mask wraps around kind of under the chin all the way back. And I'm reading the mask as more of a rigid object rather than like leather or something flexible, like a rubber or something like that. If it was rubber, that might be okay. But if it's rigid, that would make the head very difficult to move around. And so I opted to lop it off and not go under the ear and the back of the neck. So these are some decisions I made. Okay, so some of you are expressing that maybe this is the right call. I'm glad that we can be on the same page as that. But still, as an artist, as a 3D artist, trying to bring this 2D concept into a 3D model, I had to make those decisions, and I think you guys probably had to as well. It's sort of part of the package deal. The 2D is never 100% of the information. And so that was one place that I really had to use artistic liberty and make sense, like compromise. And then the other one, which I think I was skeptical of having to do this in the last stream, was the shoulder blade. If I turn it on and off, you can see in the art that it's jutting out really far. And frankly, I don't think that bothers me in the 2D art. But once I started creating it in 3D, it became very apparent that that was not gonna make sense anatomically, and so I had to err on the side of anatomy making more sense than matching the artwork. And I think again it came to a decent compromise. But those two places were the biggest compromises I had to make. The rest of the proportions, lined up pretty well with the artwork. I did have to push the elbow down a little bit. If I turn it on and off, you can see I pushed the elbow down, where it made the upper arm much shorter if I matched the art. But anyway, I don't want to beat this point to death, but the whole point being, like, we do have a responsibility as 3D artists when we're making authentic character models from concept art, that we will have to fill in gaps. And so that comes with time, comes with practice, but it makes you very valuable because like as long as you're close enough, people are going to still see that character. You're authentic, but you're also able to compromise and hide that well enough. You'll still create an authentic character. And then finally, just to go over some of what I ended up doing workflow-wise, checking real quick to see if I'm missing any questions. Maybe not. Oh yeah, here we go. So from Silent Heart, how would you fix any holes in the skin modifier when marking different roots doesn't work? That's a good question. There have been times where I couldn't get the skin modifier to work the way I needed it to. Switching the root sometimes fixes the holes, but sometimes it doesn't. In my experience, I find that let's use a hand. Recently I did a hand with the skin modifier, and to place the joints of the fingers exactly where I needed to would cause a hole. But if I like moved the finger out a little bit and broke that finger, basically, it would fix the hole. And so I might make that decision and be like, okay, I'll sacrifice that. I'll apply the skin modifier, and then when I start sculpting, I'll just move the finger back, because I think it is more important. It's a bigger difficulty to like fill those holes at times. And so I've been known to do that, kind of break this model a little bit, break the form of the skin modifier in order to fix those holes. But in rare instances, I will apply the skin modifier and just fix the holes usually it's like one hole. It's not multiple holes usually, but fill that with traditional polygon tools, like identifying the hole and selecting the border verts and filling it, stuff like that. But it can be a pain. It's definitely, I guess, buggy is what I would call that. And it'd be nice if that would be polished a little bit more. But to your point, yeah, it can be a pain for sure. Hope that was helpful. All right, so yeah, what I quickly realized, if you remember when I did last week's stream, is I left everything as one big piece, one character, like one sculpture for the entire character. And I quickly learned that is not the way to go. And I tend to do this with every sculpture. I start it as one piece usually, and then I will start segmenting it as it makes sense in the workflow. And, I told you guys about my weird thing with feet, how I focus there first, and that I need to get those right, very soon during the sculpting and modeling process. So I started with the feet and quickly lopped those off, or lopped one off. I focused on the right, or his left foot, got that the way I wanted, and simply duplicated it to the other side. And that's how it started. And then I moved up to the pants. And since that, we're dealing with layers of clothing, I ended up lopping off the pants, lopping off the jacket. Again, with the overlapping clothing, it's very difficult. Let's look up here, for example. It's very difficult to keep where the two layers of clothing meet. It's very difficult to keep that cut in as one piece with the crease brush or something. But instead, if I just lop it off, then it's very easy to just crash those two surfaces together and it be a very distinct separation. So that's a separate piece. The tie is a separate piece. And actually, that's just a simple polygon model. That was way easier to build quickly that way using subdivision surface smoothing than to sculpt it. Same thing with the strap. That's just a simple polygon model. But all different pieces. But yeah, I mean, it is technically a concept sculpture, but there's no problem at all using using polygon geometry. Like the sword, that would just be dumb to sculpt from a primitive shape. So very very easy to model it quickly. And then also the man purse is currently a simple polygon model, but I'll add sculpting detail later. But yeah, and then finally what really helped me was separating the arms, because I have this seam in the blazer that served as a perfect place to separate the two objects. And that way, if I'm trying to sculpt on the inside of the arm, it's a typical place that can be difficult with characters. Finding the right angle, well, instead, when it's separated, I can select the object, go into local view, sculpt my stuff, my wrinkles and details and whatnot, and then exit local view. And that's way easier than, doing the mask bit in sculpt mode and hiding certain parts of the mesh. It's just a lot easier, to end up cutting your sculpture into different segments. Also, it's helpful because Blender can handle a total number of polygons very well, high numbers of polygons, but dynamic topology slows down when you have all of them combined into one object. But if I've got separate pieces, each of those pieces can be higher topology and still run smoother. So that was another benefit. You can go, in general, higher resolution in your sculpting when you separate your pieces. But those are the tips I was hoping to pull out from the sculpture that I did this week. It was really fun to do that alongside you guys and post work in progresses, and you guys did the same. It was just fun working alongside. Let me see if I'm missing any questions. Don't think so. Okay, cool. Yeah, don't hesitate to ask questions, as you have them. I know I'm probably a broken record for the people who show up to these streams a lot, but I'd hate for a new person to come in and not know, like, can I ask a question? Is that cool? But yeah, that's a big reason why we're doing this. Awesome. Okay, so back to the presentation. Let me turn off my notifications real quick. Where is that? All right. So back to the presentation. What are we on to now? Okay, yeah, the nitty gritty of what this week is about, going into the lecture, so to speak, of what this week is all about. Production-friendly character models. This week is where you're going to have to make a decision about how you're going to proceed with your character, because it might not making your sculpture into a production-friendly character only makes sense if that's going to be used for animation, right? And okay, I have a question. Here's a question from John. Is the video meant to be private members because it's available to the public? Okay, I think you mean the YouTube stream. So as far as we know, we cannot make the YouTube stream private officially. But if you're, so this is a member-only stream. The class is for members only. And basically, as long as you guys are cool enough not to copy the link and paste it to people, then I don't think non-members can find the stream. They can't load it on the page, but in theory, you could post the stream, link out publicly, and people could just watch that on YouTube. We'd appreciate you not doing that, since this is supposed to be for members and for the people who support us. Yeah. If you know a way to make it private, we don't know how to do that with YouTube. We could do it with Ustream, but we don't know how to officially do that with YouTube. Another question from Zach. Have you ever tried blocking in a base with primitives instead of the skin modifier? I don't know that I have. When you say that, what I think of is like taking a bunch of, kind of like elongated capsule shapes and putting a capsule shape for the upper arm, and then for the lower arm, a sphere for the hand. That's what I hear, and kind of building out a shape like that. I've never done that personally. I find the skin modifier does pretty well with that. But it sounds like a really good approach, a really valid approach if you want to approach it that way, because you could Boolean all the objects together and just start dynamic topology sculpting, and it should go off without a hitch. But that's a good idea. Yeah, shaping with prop editing. Yes, that's a good idea. I've never done it myself that I recall. But maybe I have. Maybe it has slipped in there and I've just forgotten. Let's see. All right. No other questions that I'm aware of? All right. So, yeah, back to the production-friendly character models. If you're going to, if you want your character to be used for an animation, I've seen some of you say like, this character that I'm building is for a video game that I want to make one day, or it's for a short film that I want to make. I've seen other people, not in this class necessarily, but other people say like, I want to make a web comic or a like TV show pilot or something like that. You would need the production-friendly understanding, the workflow, how to go about that. And so like for those people who are here, this is going to be a very important week for you. For everyone else who doesn't necessarily care about that, you just want to sculpt in general, like make a bunch of sculptures and call them done, then that's fine. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Omar. I appreciate that, Omar. That helps. So from Ala Diaby, let's see. I know you might have this question like a zillion times, but I'm going to say it. If I'm a total noob in drawing 2D, should I drop 3D sculpting and just focus on box modeling? No, I don't think so at all. Like, I don't think you need to be a 2D artist to be able to sculpt in 3D with a pen and tablet and stuff. Frankly, I don't do any 2D art. I used to do it, 15 years ago when I was a teenager and younger. I did it all the time, but I haven't really done it at all since then. So no, I don't think you need. Well, I know that you don't need a 2D drawing expertise. It would help. Like, sure, it would be. It would, those two arts inform each other definitely, but they're not required. So if you're finding that you're getting into 3D sculpting and it's really difficult for you, and you don't love 3D sculpting and you would rather just polygon model it, that's fine. But if you want to sculpt, don't let that stop you at all. Like, keep trying, keep practicing. I mean, most people in the world have at least, they know how to like write. They have a reason to write with pens and stuff. And that's why it's more natural to me, more so than being able to draw, in 2D. But hopefully that answered your question. But welcome if you are a Blender, a total beginner noob. Welcome. In January I did a complete beginners class that maybe you weren't aware of at the time, but I will redo that class again, rerun it at some point in the future. If there are beginners in here and you would like to see that class sooner rather than later, let me know. But I'm not sure what class I'm going to do next, but I could do the beginner one again if it's really desired. Another question from Jack: is it a good idea to start sculpting the character's body like a doll and then sculpt clothes over it, or just go to the clothes? That's a good question. And I would have maybe a different answer depending on the situation. So obviously with this character, I did not sculpt a body underneath. Like, the head and all the head pieces are just, cut off at a certain point. The hands down here just cut off. And the reason I did that is because I try, I don't know why the character would ever need to be naked. I'm not planning on doing extensive cloth simulation or anything. That's where it would be reasonable, right? Like, you need a body underneath and then simulate clothes on top of it. That's a reason you would need a body. But other than that, if you're just doing like skinning, like a weight painting, armature and weight painting, I don't really see much reason to create a body underneath. I would just sculpt the clothes, and that's what I did with this character. If I want to simulate at all, it would, if I created this character for animation and wanted to simulate something, it would just be the coattails. And so that's why I'm not doing a body. But if you want to do simulation, then yeah, that would make sense. If you're just doing a sculpture, to me, it seems like a lot of unnecessary work to sculpt a body and then put all the clothes on top of it. But that could just be because I've done a lot of characters in my career, and so like it's easier for me to imagine the body underneath. But if it's harder for you or anybody else to imagine the body, maybe that would be helpful. So that you could like when you sculpt the clothing and you intersect the body, you're like, oh, okay, that's obviously too thin. I mean, that's a good reason to do it, but hopefully there was an answer in there for you somewhere. So Lord Humongous, I think is what he clarified his name was. I usually do full doll body, and then I'd clothes afterwards, but others do clothes separate. Yeah. So yeah, it's a bit of a relative approach. If that would be helpful for you, it's a good approach. It's a valid one. It might take longer, so it won't be the fast route, but that's okay. Another question: could the next class be about modeling vehicles, especially tanks and spacecraft? Okay, so a vote for vehicle modeling and tanks and spacecraft. I mean, that's pretty detailed. So detailed, maybe advanced modeling vehicles. Okay, a vote for that. I'll keep that in mind for sure. But yeah, I need to figure out a way to like get a better pulse on what people want for classes. We are like our demographic. We have a ton of beginners, and so naturally we want to be able to foster that initial interest and get them started in Blender. But you can't teach Blender or beginners and advanced people at the same time. So that's always a struggle for me, like what to teach next. But okay, now we've got 2, maybe potentially 3 vehicle votes. Hard surface sculpting, okay. Animation class. I'm glad you brought that up. I am grooming Wayne Dixon to do an animation class with this same format. I'm just waiting until we can maybe create an official class system, because the Frankenstein approach of using the class thread and then the live events and trying to post announcements, it's all kind of haphazard at this point. So thank you for patience for you guys still being in on this despite that. But we want to build a very legit system to facilitate this. Once we've done that, I plan on getting Wayne Dixon in here to teach an animation class very quickly. Because he's so good at feedback and interacting. As if you guys have taken his courses, you are probably very aware of that. I guess your Jerry animation would be tough. I think it would be hard to watch a lot of animation demonstration, but he could do. It might be very critique based, right? Like you do work and then he takes time to critique it from a professional standpoint. That would be super valuable. But I agree, like watching someone animate would be a little bit like watching grass grow. But I think the same about modeling too. All right, so a lot of questions. I love this. Yeah, keep them coming. Why are all Blender animators Australian? The big ones I think of are Wayne Dixon, Bjorn Leonard, and Andrew Price is not necessarily an animator, but is definitely a Blender celebrity for sure. But didn't you also have Hjalti from Iceland originally at the Blender Foundation? So there's a little bit of variety. But yeah, that is funny that Australia seems to have some good Blender animators in it. Couple more questions. Is there any official way to vote on this in a survey? Oh, like a next topic? That is a really good question. And I've been thinking about how to do that efficiently. I'm thinking at the end of this class, maybe I'll send out a survey, both to gauge like how useful the class was, but then also give you some options for a next class. But yeah, an official way to do that would make a lot of sense. Is there any question from Rosalia? Is there any lesson about 2D drawing animation in Blender? No, not that I'm aware of. So Grease Pencil is a very exciting tool that's up and coming, and it's been around for a while, but it's not been in the trunk, like the official version of Blender. And we're hesitant to teach, or especially me, I'm hesitant to teach that stuff because, it's very subject to change. And if we take 2-3 months to record an expensive, because it's expensive to record and pay instructors for their time to record that course, and then it's just obsolete once they change something and it goes official. We're gun shy to do that, and so we want to. When it comes out, we absolutely want to. I want to get Wayne to do that because I think he's our animation guru. He would be a great teacher for that, I think. But we don't have one currently. It's definitely on the to-do list. You just contradicted yourself. Questions are how you learn. Ease up on the question. I thought you were talking to me. Yeah, okay. I will. There's just a lot of questions coming in, so maybe I'll take a pause from those and actually start doing some stuff. But yeah, hopefully, let's not be upset with the amount of questions people want to ask. But yeah, I know that's probably boring to watch. All right, so I'm going to go back to the presentation, and we'll talk about what this production-friendly stuff is all about, why it's important. And so the idea being, we have on the left, this is a character I modeled for the film Freebirds, and on the left is the concept sculpt. We were given artwork for the character from the concept department, and the first step, like we talked about last week, was to sculpt the authentic version of the character in pose in a snapshot way that the director could see what this character would look like in motion in 3 dimensions. And this is obviously a lot more compelling than the neutral version, which is super boring to look at. And this would not sell the director that we've accomplished the essence of that character. And so what we do, we sculpt the concept first, and then once that's approved, we transition it over to this neutral version. We retopologize it, and we put it in the most neutral possible position so that the animation pipeline can use this model. It can't really use this model on the left. This is visual, and then on the right, it's purely functional. And a little bit more background. Again, this is if you want to make your character's animation animatable. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of this concept of translating it from concept sculpt to a neutral version. So that's the context I'm addressing this first, and then I'll get to, if you don't want to do this, if you want to just sculpt, we'll talk about that as well. But that's the concept, and let's take a look at exactly why or what is changing. So the face becomes completely expressionless. I even close the eyes up here because that particular pipeline preferred that to be the case. And then it was easier to rig that way. Also, the fabric details, all of them are gone. This is a very wrinkle-free form of the clothing because this was going to have some simulation and you needed to start completely unsimulated. But it looks stupid, right? Like, it's so boring to look at. But that is perfect for the pipeline to follow. And in the A pose, we get him out of the pose where he's holding his gun and, you know, looking cool and villainous. And we put him in a completely A pose, neutral. But the wrinkles, I did want to point out that the wrinkles in the boots, they were kept because those would not be simulated. They would just be rigged, you know, like with bones and weights, vertex weights. So these are the kind of things that we need to transition from the concept to the neutral in order to push this down the animation pipeline. That's very important. This on the left cannot be animated well or easily. So then we get to, should you retopologize and neutralize? You need to ask yourself a couple more questions. Do you want to be a professional character artist? Like, why are you getting into character art? Why are you taking this class? Do you aspire to be a professional? If you want to work at a big studio, or if you want to have a freelance career doing character art, this is going to be a request that you get. You know, people are going to come to you with art. I want this art in 3D. Okay. And so, and then it needs to be animated. And so if that's the case, you're likely only going to get work if you can do that, if you can deliver an animation friendly model. If you want to go that direction, if that's what you aspire to, you're going to want to learn retopology and neutralization for your character. Okay, I already answered that. Do you want your character to be animated one day? Even if it's not professionally, if you're doing your own work, like this is a hobby and you just want to create characters and make animations, you know, put them on your YouTube channel. Well, you need to be able to make those models animation friendly. And so, yeah, in that way, if that's your aspiration, this week will be very important to you. And then no to both. You just want to make cool static characters. That's fine. That's your other option for this week, to choose that. And that would just be sculpting, purely sculpting. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a bit. But so retopology, if you've been around CG Cookie much at all, then you're very aware of this term and you're aware of what it is. And it's something I teach a lot. But just to cover the basics, with a character in mind, concentric edge loops to define joints. That's going to be very important, meaning, you know, radial topology around the shoulder, around the mouth, around the eyes, anything that deforms a lot, you're going to want concentric loops around it. Even quads, four-sided faces, you're going to want an even distribution of those faces across the entire surface and this is for subsurface based animation. So this is like, you know, what Pixar does and DreamWorks does, where you do your scene and then you set it off to the renderer and wait hours and hours and hours for it to finish. So this is subsurface based. You're going to be smoothing that model ultimately at render time. And so for that, you need to focus on quads. But then alternatively, if you're going for more of a game application, and the character you're working on this month, you want to be a game character, then you want this to be a budget-wise poly count. You want a budget-wise poly count for your retopology. You want it to fit within your technical budgets of your game. You want to be mindful of that kind of stuff. And triangles are fine for that. But the retopology stage and why it's important is you don't have to focus on the art of your character at all. Hopefully you've already done that in the concept sculpt. And then, you know, you need to neutralize that concept sculpt into something that can be retopologized in a neutral pose. But the retopology is basically a non-artistic step that lets you really focus on getting your topology correct. And that's what's so powerful to me about retopology. I need to focus on that entirely in order for it to be its best. and separate the art into the sculpting side. And then finally, neutrality, oppose matters. Again, it's 100% about function, 0% about the visual. One thing that bothers me so much when I had to neutralize my characters is you have your feet on the ground, and naturally most people have them a little bit turned out from each other, and in real effects I would submit the model like that, and the rigging department would always say, no, I need them straight. It's just easier to rig straight. And it drove me nuts because as soon as I did that, the model felt bad. It just felt bad, and I hated it. So I always tried to push back, but that's the example of the function has to outweigh the visual. And so A pose, in my opinion, is better than T pose. I'm sure there's a lot of debate about that, and a rigger is the best person to ask. But A pose, like, to me, how often do people have their hands or their arms in the air like this? Spider-Man does. He's a character that T pose might be better. But most characters like have their hands down. So it doesn't make as much sense to go extreme like this, in my opinion, for a neutral pose when you're just going to put them down during animation. So I think A pose is better. If you had to choose between one or the other, I would say that A pose is best. If you're doing mocap, I believe that still requires T pose, at least last time I checked. So that's an example of where you would want to do a T pose neutral version. And then the accessories. So this was just a side thought that I had. Like, my character has like a bag, a man purse, a sword, and the bunny mask. In that instance, like in the accessories, we would just kind of put them off to the side, like floating in space, and the riggers would just rig that to stick onto the characters. But if you have accessories, that's what neutralizing the accessories typically means. And then okay, so that's the idea of going from concept sculpt to animation friendly, production friendly character model. Now, let's say concept sculpt and done. That's all you care about. You just want to sculpt a bunch of characters, and that's valid. Like the ability, because whether it's for personal use or even, there are some professionals who only sculpt, but you get to crank out a bunch of static sculptures the way you like. Here's 3 examples from me. It's common to see sketchbooks, in 3D forums where you just do sculptures, in like an hour, 2 hours or so, and just create a collection of these sculptures, get a lot of practice with that. And that's totally valid. There are professional digital sculptors out there with the same movie project, the Freebirds movie. Before our internal modeling department got a hold of the model at all, they would send the main character art to this guy who lived in Europe, and he was a pretty good sculptor. Well, he was a very good sculptor, but I didn't see much of his work on like forums, but I think he got into the sculpting side of the industry early, and so he had a good reputation with studios. And we hired him to just sculpt our main characters in a pose, like do the concept sculpt. And we paid him a lot of money, a little too much money in my opinion, to just do that. So it is possible, but if you wanted to be a professional digital sculptor only, I think the avenues are like, toy companies like Sculptures, like McFarlane Toys. They have those really expensive, like very accurate and detailed superhero sculpts or stuff like that. Like that would be a pretty cool job to have. But I think if you go that direction, you really, really need to be good at sculpting, and you need to stand out. And there are a lot of good sculptors out there, so that might be a slightly more difficult road. But it is a professional plausibility. But I'll speak from experience. Just being able to sculpt and leave it at that is creatively very satisfying. I like having a big collection of sculpts. I like when I've done that, when I've gone through seasons of sculpting a lot, it is fun. So all that to say, this week you have a choice, and the power is yours to choose if you're going to turn your model into an animation-friendly version. Even if you don't animate it right away, if you just want to do that for the practice or for the possibility of animating it later, that's another reason I do it. Like, well, maybe I will want to animate it one day. Then do that, and this week will look like neutralizing your sculpt and then retopologizing it. If you don't want to do that, then I would recommend spending more time on the concept sculpt. With the exception of a few of them, like Mal Holmesy, your sculpt is there's not much more you can do. Like, that one's great. but one of the notes that I gave most often was all of the sculpts could use more polish, tightening the creases, really fleshing out those details. Some of you didn't have much of a pose, so like if you want to focus on sculpting, take this week to push your character into a better pose, more dynamic pose, one that is influenced and supported by the backstory that you guys wrote, and just focus on the sculpture, getting that as perfect as you can, as impressive as you can. That's what your week will look like if you choose that. And then for the last week, we all can kind of come back to talk about texturing and putting color on our characters. So that's what week 3 is about. The goal: consider the purpose and value of production-friendly characters and decide between production-friendly or pure sculpture for your character. The training that I've assigned for you is the Introduction to Retopology. That's a course by Jonathan Williamson. Really good intro to that whole concept of retopo. And then chapters 3 and 4 of Intro to Character Modeling. This is where Jonathan takes his sculpture and turns it into a production-friendly mesh, a production-friendly model. In chapter 4 of Modeling Realistic Characters, same concept. Even though it is for a realistic character, like I go over the same kind of stuff about why it's important to neutralize and all that stuff that I've just talked a lot about. So use those for support as you go throughout the week. And then the homework, I would love to see everybody do the Robo Orb retopo exercise. I think that's the exercise that finishes Introduction to Retopology. And I would love to see everyone do that, even if you don't want to make your sculpture production friendly. But I'd love to see everyone try to do the retopology and just get your feet wet with that. And then post a link to your submission. If you're maintaining a static character sculpture, just focus on polishing that to perfection, like we talked about. And if you're retopologizing your character sculpt, if you're making it production friendly, retopologize and neutralize it, which is what I'm going to be doing this week. I'm going to turn that into production friendly. And see if I've missed any questions. I know there's a little bit of drama around the questions from what I could tell. Sorry about the drama, guys. Hopefully we're all chill and happy. From Omar, aren't you afraid that re-sculpting the cowboy will get you different results and not like the pose sculpts? Yeah, that's a valid concern, and it does take some time, some care to be able to neutralize your character and maintain the same thing. Now, the way I'm going to try and show you this today during the demonstration is, so I take my jacket off, getting a little warm. That drama's getting hot in here. Like when you have, like for example, I've got a sculpted arm, right? Well, when I neutralize it, I have distinct points of manipulation, of rotation to use. And so I can, in edit mode, like center my cursor into the middle of this joint and then move it down, then do it here, move it down. And I've literally maintained the exact form of that arm. And I can do that with all of the body. So the body proportions should all be very, very authentic to what the sculpture was. And so there's not a huge risk of losing the character. There is potentially, if there is a big expression on the face and then making that neutral, it might be hard to remember, but there's an art to it. There is definitely an art to neutralizing, depending on how extreme the concept sculpt is. Is the character that you were referring to in your comment while viewing my submission the Rusley character? Let's see. Is that to? Actually, yeah, that was one of them. MJan's, your character in particular, I felt like you were very authentic to the artwork, but the artwork didn't give you enough information, and so it left the 3D sculpture wanting a little bit, especially with the fabric. And so that was an interesting case of like where less detail worked in the artwork, but it didn't bother me in the artwork, but it didn't fulfill the 3D sculpt. But yeah, that was part of my motivation to talk about that. Would you repurpose the use of would you purposely use RetopoFlow add-on? How much would be faster to complete the exercise? Well, the Retopo Flow is an amazing add-on. Like it would unfortunately I've decided to not use it because I think I would grow dependent on it, and I don't want to make training that requires that because it's an additional expense. So I play around with the Retopo Flow add-on, and I know that it's very good. And if you have it, you should use it. But I just don't teach it. I don't use it so that I avoid being dependent on it, and then not being able to teach you the traditional way to retopologize. But yeah, if you've got Retopo Flow, definitely use it. It's a sick tool. Jonathan Williamson, it's been his baby for a couple years, of maybe 3 years now, and he's one of the gods of retopology, especially in the Blender world. So like he's making that thing legit. So if you've got it, and if you want it, like you will not regret it whatsoever. Let's see. I'm not. Sorry, I was just reading. All right, I'm gonna try and finish up the questions. I know I will try not to spend too much time, but what projects did you work on at Real Effects? I worked on I'll go backwards. Freebirds was the last project I remember working on. There's a ride at Universal Studios. It's called Minion Mayhem, and it's a 3D ride, and I was very involved in that project. We did an Ice Age TV special for Blue Sky. It was the Christmas special that involved all their characters and from the Ice Age series, and so we did that. It was like a 30-minute TV special, and that was fun. It was it was a high profile, but both of those were fairly high profile. But also, if you're ever in, well, at the time, I don't know if it's still around, but the Rockettes show in New York, they revamped their show. This was 4 or 5 years ago at this point. But to be a game, like a game themed dance thing, it was super weird, if I'm honest. But we did all the visuals for that, and I worked a lot on that. And I think that's kind of, those were the big projects I worked on at Real Effects back in the day. Very lightly touched some of the Looney Tunes shorts. Well, I think I've said this before, but one of my most proudest things I did at Real Effects was we did a bunch of Looney Tunes shorts, and finally they gave us the big one. Warner Brothers gave us the big one, which was Bugs Bunny. To do a Bugs Bunny short, and these played at the beginning of movies, and they were with 3D glasses and all that stuff. And so I got to model Bugs Bunny, and I'm like, this is making me geek out. Of course, I mean Bugs Bunny, the Bugs Bunny with actual art from Warner Brothers. Like, I mean, I was laser perfect with all the modeling on that guy. And then we did it. The Warner Brothers loved it, and then we dropped that contract to work on Freebirds. So I don't know if I can ever show that publicly, but take my word for it, I did it. Anyway, if we've already done the Robo Orb, can we link to the one we've already done? Absolutely. If you've done that one, go ahead and link that. Totally fine. In what course is said the orb modeled? It's the Introduction to Retopology, I'm pretty sure. Let me just double check that. And for the people who are only here to see the demonstration, I'm going to be starting that very soon. Let's see. Oh, that's awesome. Look at that. I've not seen that today. Whew. Look at that hair. Holy smokes. I'm going to have to look at that later. All right, so Introduction to Retopology, that would be in the modeling. Yeah, okay, that's where the orb is modeled. And if we look at the exercise, yeah, completing the Robo Orb Retopology, that's where that is. Question, this whole event is awesome. Will there be any repetition of this certain topic, making a character? Yeah, absolutely. I think ideally, like, I'll be able to rerun all the classes I do periodically, depending on, like what kind of demand there is. But I would love to run this again, in 6 months, a year. I don't know when exactly, but this very same course, and I would pick a different character to model alongside you guys, but the same curriculum. And yeah, so I do plan on doing that for sure. But change it up, maybe do a realistic one at some point. Maybe just focus on pure sculpting, during one of them, and we just sculpt like 3 or 4 characters that month. That'd be kind of fun. So John's saying the retopology orb exercise is still confusing to me. Jonathan encourages the use of the shrink wrap, but I'm still not sure why I'd use it over surface snapping. So when I've used shrink wrap is doing a bunch of cylindrical shapes. Like for example, an arm. If I've got a straight arm, and I might very well do that on this character. Let me go back to Blender real quick. Yeah. So if I straighten this character out, I mean this arm out, like it would be very simple to take a cylinder and just like wrap it around the arm and then shrink wrap modifier. That'd be way easier than like drawing your retopology, faces one by one or grid by grid all the way around, because it's annoying, orbiting around a cylindrical shape. So that's an example of where you would want to use the shrink wrap. That's where I use it still. Let's see. Anything else? What about B services? That's built into the Blender add-ons. Is that still in there? Look at that. Huh. So I have not seen anything about B-Mesh in a long time. It's kind of an old tool. I mean, try it. Like it was pretty groundbreaking when it came out. So maybe it still has those cool tools, but sick is slang. Sorry, I say sick sometimes to mean like cool, but sorry if you don't like that. But anyway, try B surfaces. I've not used it in years. I really find Blender's built-in tools to be very good for retopology, and I've used TopoGun, which was like the premier retopology tool for a while. I don't know, maybe it still is, but I've used ZBrush retopology, and Blender's to me is quite good. And I like that with the other tools like TopoGun and ZBrush, retopology feels like a separate mode. And like you just go into retopology mode, which RetopFlow does this too. But I kind of like about Blender how it's all the same tools, right? And so it feels very natural to retopologize rather than like, all right, time to go into retopology mode is sort of what my brain does. I want to know, oh yes, I love realism. From Omar, working at a studio, is there a dedicated person only for doing retopology, or does the artist that sculpt do his own retopology? In my experience, there is not a dedicated retopology person. That might, if it were me, that would drive me a little crazy to only retopologize. To me, retopo is a good like closure on the modeling process. Sculpting is the first part, and the retopology. Sculpting usually takes a little bit more work and thought process, where retopology is like, okay, I've nailed it. I got approval on the sculpture. Now it's just, I can sit back, listen to some music, and retopologize this guy. So anyway, all that to say, like in my experience, artists that sculpt also do the retopology and the neutralization and pass that along down the pipeline. I don't know about bigger studios if they do have retopology specific people. I mean, it's plausible, I guess. Let's see. What about hair? A solid piece of mesh or hair cards? Okay. I think you're asking, Mahomesy, about like sculpting hair maybe for the concept sculpt. Is that what you're asking? Or maybe when you retopologize it too. I'm going to go with the retopology since that's what we're talking about. So at Real Effects, we used, let me see if that's visible. The hair system was based on NURBS tubes. So you would like put a collection of NURBS tubes that sort of looked like, let me go back. Yeah. You can't really see it great, but all these little dreadlock type things are NURBS tubes. And when you would send that down the line, the effects department would grow hair in those tubes. And so you were like, the modeler was responsible for styling the hairstyle in a general sense by modeling these tubes, and then the effects department would grow the hair. So that was a big pipeline, a big studio doing that stuff. But for if it were me, I mean, I'd probably just do particle hair, honestly, or do hair cards, because depending on the application, hair cards can look super convincing, and probably easier to animate hair cards rather than hair particles. But Yeah, when doing retopo. Okay, great. All right, another question. Would you go back and sculpt micro details after the retopology or do that before the retopo? Another good question. With this particular character that I'm working on, and since this is stylized in general, and I don't think anyone so far has picked, that very barely stylized version. Malholmesy, maybe you a little bit, like there's a lot of detail in your sculpt, but for this character, I don't see a need to go in and like sculpt pore detail or like micro wrinkle details in stuff. So for this one, what I plan to do is do an authentic retopology so that all the details I need will be captured in the topology itself. And then subdivision smooth it for final result. And with a stylized nature, often a smooth surface is what you want. It's what I did with real effects. Like all of the characters I built for that, this is just pure retopology for the final. Okay, right here, the final mesh. Any detail was built into the final mesh. But for a realistic sculpt, I would retopologize it, neutralize it, and then go back and do another sculpting pass with higher frequency details to capture that. And you can do that with your stylized version, your stylized character if you want, if it's warranted. But that's all in the realistic character course. I go over that. If you're interested in that approach, then it's this course right here. We follow the same approach: concept sculpt, retopology, and then high detail sculpt. So yeah, look into that if that's what you're interested in. Why not bake the sculpted details? Because at least for me, and if you're doing so there's different contexts. For me, I should also say that I'm approaching this character from a subsurface smoothing perspective. Like I'm going to retopologize it pretty high res, as high resolution as this. And it's going to be smoothed upon render time. And so there's no reason to bake any details because they're all going to be captured in the topology. If you're doing a game model, then yes, you can do that. Like do a low res retopology, bake the details from your sculpt, and that's going to be fine. Cool. See you, Char. I appreciate you being here, and thanks for saying it was a good class and good answers. I appreciate that. And then so I think I answered your question, William Miller. Why not bake the sculpted details? That's why I'm not doing it. All the details that I will keep will be in the retopology itself. It will be built in. No need to bake. But if you're doing a game character, you might need to bake it. Another question, which always bothered me: sculpt one solid mesh or divide into sculpture parts. So just for the sake of time, I actually answered that question earlier, and when I was going over this sculpture that I did this week, and like I talked about why I separated stuff into different parts. I prefer separation. I think doing it as one solid piece is always a waste a little bit. Like it's going to make your job harder. And then if you sculpt it separately, I can always come in here and Boolean these objects together later. So that's why I would say I rarely see a reason to sculpt as one solid piece. I'm glad you mentioned that, Omar, because I am getting dry. I have this big thing of water because last week I got super dry. So appreciate that reminder. All right, I think I've answered the questions. William Miller, so they're textures. Yeah, if you do, well, when I'm going to do it, there's not going to be any textures involved. I'm not going to bake any details down into textures. It's going to be like if there's a wrinkle, that's not going to be a normal map. I'm going to model the wrinkle, okay? Like for that, that's what I mean by building it into the mesh. Sorry. Now that you mentioned water, it's all I'm thinking about. All right, so cool. I think I've caught up with the questions, and I'll get back to the demonstration, which, again, like I know what I'm going to do in the demonstration, but I've not rehearsed it, so you're going to get the raw version of what this is going to be. And the whole point of this is neutralizing first. So I've been beating around the bush, sort of, about what this is about. Now let's actually see if we can make it a reality. I like how he looks at the chat thread when he answers questions. Sorry, is that unprofessional or something? I do it for context. Like I try and highlight what I'm answering so you guys know, exactly what I'm talking about. But sorry if that's goofy. Low production value. So with the neutralization process, what I'm thinking about, I'm going to analyze my pose and think what is the easiest side, left or right, that I can neutralize the quickest and get, an authentic, that's been word of the day apparently, but get a genuine form of the character just to one side. So right off the bat, this arm I know is not going to be the easier one to deneutralize or to neutralize. So like I'm just going to get rid of it in principle. Like I don't need it. And then this hand, like my A pose, it's typical to have your hands out like this because that's easier to rig. And you don't want it stretched out because, if you just let your hand rest, that's what the neutral looks like. It does not look like this. For a while, I modeled characters like this, but then when you rig it, like there's an element of stress in your hand because you're flexing to straighten out your hands. And so when you do that, and then you model it that way, and then you rig it and you close your hand, there's this awkward tension all the time in your hand, no matter if you're at rest or if you're straight out or fist. So anyway, that was a long way to explain. Like I recommend that you relax the hand. You don't put it in a fist and you don't stretch it straight out. And so when I look at my two hand options over here, this one is more of a fist, so we don't need it. That's too hard. Let's use this one. And since it's on the other side, I'll tab into edit mode, SX -1 to reverse it, Control N to take those normals back to face outward. And let's just center, Shift Control Alt C, my origin to the geometry, There we go. And then I'm just going to put this in place because this is going to be the A pose. It's going to be like hanging out here. So what I'm doing is analyzing which side of the body is going to be easiest to neutralize, and I'm leaning towards this left, the character's left side. That arm being pulled up and all the wrinkles here in the clothing, like that's making me eliminate the right side. And oh God, chop, yeah. Remember, these are saved, so if I screwed up, like I can go get that arm back, but doesn't it feel powerful just to delete all that work? Powerful and scary. So the left side of the character is the one I'm leaning towards for neutralization, and let's test it. Let's say with the pants. I mean, we can do a quick test by selecting the pants. I'll turn off only render. Select these pants, go into object mode. Sculpt mode. And let's do symmetry. Symmetrize from positive X to negative X. All right, so my origin is bad. Or do I have rotations on? That's weird. No, maybe it's not. Okay, sorry. That confused me. So yeah, what it's doing is the origin is down here, and if we follow that straight up, it's not at all aligned with the pelvis area, right? The crotch, essentially. And so we're getting a mirror shape, and that's telling me that the crotch needs to come over to the middle. So that's, giving me very clear indication of how to neutralize it. So let's undo that. And let's see, maybe I'll just try and move the character as a whole over into the center where the pivot, the pelvis is in the center of the world, the green and red axes. So I'm going to select everything. Let's hide this camera. Whoops. Select everything, go into front orthographic with 1 and 5. We'll turn off, I don't need the background image anymore. I'm going to put the pelvis directly at the center of the world. Like look at that blue line. Move that over. Maybe rotate the entire character to face forward. That'll make it easier to put my crotch in the center. Awesome, and this makes it pretty clear for how I need to orient a lot of the body now. That was a big step, actually. So sometimes putting the origins at certain places will be better. I'm going to put it right here at the bottom of the heel. I'm going to select a face in edit mode, Shift S, cursor to selected. And then in object mode, Shift Control Alt C, origin to 3D cursor. And then I'm going to rotate this now out. Because remember, I said it's always natural, way more natural to rotate it a little bit. Me and feet, right? It never stops. And then I'm going to move it out. Again, I'm imagining that this green line is now the center of the character. And so I can just take the pant leg, again in edit mode, turn on proportional editing. Let's move that out. I'm going to make the fall off pretty substantial. Wait a minute. I got something else selected. Deselect that up top. Let's move this out. Okay, and now let's run that test again in sculpt mode. Do symmetrize. Oh, yeah, so I never moved the origin back to the center of the world. So in object mode, Shift Control Alt C? No, what am I doing? Control A to apply the location. And let's just apply the rotation and scale while we're at it. All right, now I should get a good test when I go to symmetrize. And I went the opposite direction, but that's hopeful. That's looking pretty good. Positive X to negative X. Look at that. That looks pretty good. It's a little bit extreme with the pose. It was still like how straightened, how bent backwards his legs are. So I might need to address that. But we get a pretty good neutralization on the pants. At least in the form. I realize now that the belt buckle kind of gets busted, and I don't love that I might need to should I leave the wrinkles symmetrical? I don't know that I love that. Let me undo and redo. So the waist, the width of the waist is very good. You can see that hardly changed at all. So I feel like we're remaining pretty authentic. Actually, there's a bit of a gap in between his crotch. So that kind of tells me that maybe I need to move over the waist a touch. I'll do that in edit mode and just slightly move that over. Let's try it again, symmetrize. Didn't come over enough. There we go. I think that's a little bit better. But for a test, this is working pretty good. I will have to address the belt again and probably, I don't know, figure out something to do with these wrinkles. They're a little extreme and I don't like how symmetrical they are. Usually too much symmetry, kind of breaks things. But I'm gonna roll with it, and then just for the sake of demonstration. So now we're going to the neutralization stage. So I'm going to go John Dunn 01, whereas 00 was sculpt stage. 01 is, what do you call this? Neutral. We'll just call it neutral. And 01. All right. All right, trying to catch up in the chat a little bit. Trying not to look at it, but I am. Question, what about using lattices? Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, lattices are something that I never really got into that much. I've certainly used them, but I feel like lattices are way more common than what I do. And I don't mean it to imply that I have something against lattices. Lattices are very powerful. I just find myself not using them that often. It's probably me missing out on a really good tool, frankly. So William's saying, this looks super messy. I don't think I would have the patience to do this. I always try to make my models mathematically precise. Right. That's totally fine. It is a little bit messy. And when I first got into the neutral, when that was first pitched to me at Real Effects, I remember thinking like, what a waste of time. I swear I thought that. But you just kind of get used to it. You also realize that like, this is not the final version. Like I'm going to retopologize this whole thing. And trust me, that is going to be really good, really clean topology. It's going to be mathematically brilliant. tooting my own horn pretty big. But it's going to be much better than what this is. So it grinds against the nerves a little bit, especially when we put all this work into it. But remember, I just saved a new file. At any point, I can go back and look at what it was before and remember it's still there. So we don't have to get too uptight about it. All right, doesn't look like I'm missing. Okay, here we go. We do have one from Mal Holmesy. Do you have any tips for the forearm retopology? Supination and pronation are so special moves. So I'm not sure what those words mean. Pronation and supination. Is that like a scientific term or anatomical terminology or something? But with the forearm retopology, it's basically going to be a cylinder. So, I mean, that's not going to be hard to do. So I don't necessarily know what you mean, Mal Holmesy. If you could clarify, I'd love to be able to answer that. Okay, cool. All right, I'll continue then. Don't see any other questions. Oh, a statement. Looking at it, it's fine. It's like you're subconsciously trying to look us in the eyes, LOL. Okay, I think that's about the chat. That's funny. All right, so I'm gonna delete the other shoe. I know that I can just mirror this over, and just for the sake of seeing it on the other side, I'll do that. There's not much purpose besides that. Control A. Let's actually, yeah. So what I'll do is I'll add I want to leave the origin of this foot down here at the bottom of the heel. I find that to be a very natural place to put it when I'm moving stuff around. And so I'll add a mirror modifier and choose the pants as my object. And that way it uses the origin at the center. Excellent. So yeah, let's address how these pants are pretty extreme. I might just might be as simple as this. Just move it back. Kind of making his gluteus maximus a little bit bigger than maybe it needs to be. So the inspiration here is the fact that he's leaning so far forward that his upper body would need to bend backward like this in order to make him seem balanced. And so I'm going to try and neutralize that a little bit more, put his center of gravity at the center. And then I can run another symmetrize just to make sure, okay, it was already symmetrical. All right, so we've neutralized the whole bottom half already. Not really a big deal. All about that base. That's pretty funny. What I should have done is remembered the value that I moved backward our character, our bottom, our pelvis, so that I could then move back all these objects the same exact amount. But I'll just eyeball it. Remember, be gestural. Don't be too precious with your stuff. It is okay to be gestural. Being too protective of your model and your model in a work in progress state can be a big hindrance. Trust me, I've spent so much time like looking at my model when it's done. I don't know if you guys have this problem, but like, if you do a render or something, like I'll just sit here for like 10 minutes and like just look at it. Is it right? Whatever. I like this part of it. I don't like this part of it. And so when I'm finishing the end of a project, it ends up being very slow because I just end up looking at it. Really trying to analyze it. And I'm not sure that's always a good thing because I can get too protective and I'll be more cautious with everything I do after that. But anyway, that's kind of a weird point. So I'm just going to move actually this off to the side for now because it's distracting me. And I'm going to try and I'm also going to hide this. Whoops. Hide these pieces. I'm just going to try and get the torso to straighten out. And basically it's just going to be a twisting of the upper half and moving it a little bit forward. All right, so I'm hiding what I don't need. And then let's see with the tie. So this is going to come down to a technique maybe involving, how do I say this? Like I'm trying to rotate multiple objects together at the same time. I'm not going to worry about that. Forget it. It's going to be too overly complex for no reason. I'm going to hide the tie because I can just move that into position later. But I'm going to merge these two objects, although I don't like that. That's kind of protruding and I never noticed it. Let's just push that in real quick. So I'm going to select this object, go into sculpt mode. And with my inflate brush, I'm just going to move that backward, push it backward. There we go. That is so much easier to fix rather than like cutting a new crease and all that stuff. Hence the, separate pieces is easier. All right, so we've got that. Back to the mouse. Oh, awesome. So I saw someone Liviu Marion Sopan. It's the second time. I'm super interested in topology, so here I am, even though I haven't joined the class. Well, welcome. I'm glad that, even people who aren't taking the class officially, like, all members are welcome to pop in and pick up tidbits as they want. It's cool. I guess it's kind of like what I did in college sometimes. I would just pop into a class that was interesting, but I didn't want to, I didn't need the credits or something. So yeah, welcome. I hope you get stuff out of topology, even though I'm probably going to run out of time before actually retopologizing, but oh well. All right, so with these two objects, I'm just going to merge them real quick so that with Control J so that I can rotate all of these the same. And this is, I think, my heaviest object, yeah. So I'm just going to try and select this bit, the upper half. And then I'm going to need to position, So I'm selecting what I want to rotate. That's selected first, but now I want to make a selection that allows me to position the cursor where I want it. So let's try the cursor here first. I'm going to put it here, and then actually I don't need to make a selection for this to happen. I'm going to put it there in the side view, and then in the 3D cursor options, just move the X value to 0. That way I get it in the center of our body. Go back to the side view. Oh, I don't need the side view. And then from here, I'm going to try rotating this around using proportional editing. Let's just hit R and Z. And it might take a moment. Okay, it didn't take long at all, actually. So I'm going to start rotating, but I don't need that much influence. Let's drag it down. Okay, so now I've got my influence sort of set. And maybe from the top, I can get my shoulders to line back up straight. Okay, that looks pretty straight. Let's double check it. It's getting a little muddy, isn't it? Okay. So what that's telling me is that rotation, let's go back and forth. That rotation keeps the chest kind of off kilter. So, and this makes sense, now I can see that my chest is not pointed straight up and down, it angles off that direction. Okay, so we'll undo that. And then if I put my cursor a little off to the side, watch, that rotation will now, oh, I lost it. I lost the selection. This rotation now should kind of pull the, wow, I lost a lot by undoing. Okay, that didn't really work as much as I thought it would, but I can move if I move the cursor further off to the right, using that as a center point should bring our, oh my goodness, noob. So I was never using the 3D cursor as my pivot point. Yeah, so it'll never work if you do that, if you don't do that. So let's try this again. There we go. Now you can see that it's bringing the chest back toward the center. And I think that this fall off of, the sharp fall off is not what I need. Let's try smooth. Yeah, that's a lot better. So from the top, now that I've got the rotation the way I, set up, so to speak, I can rotate this object. Now it's too much. Sorry, so I am getting finicky, and I'm just trying to get this rotation perfect. Do a little bit more work here to save me work later. And the rotation, so once I straighten it out, like that, it ideally would put the collar right at the intersection of the red and green axes, which it didn't quite, but that's okay. I can just pull it over to the side now. Okay, line that up in the center. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, much more neutralized, but it's still leaning back a lot. So since it's leaning back, let's just rotate it using the 3D cursor where it is, because that's about where the spine would be. So let's just rotate it up. A little bit of leaning back I'm fine with. And then I'll jump into sculpt mode and just try and even this out a bit. This coat is also asymmetrical. That's going to be potentially going to be a challenge. Okay, I'm focusing on our visual right side, the character's left side. And now let's do a test for symmetry. And I always need to check my orientation, the origin. Control A, apply the location, and let's do rotation and scale. And that will just put our origin at the center of the world, which is what we need for symmetrize. Let's try that again. Okay, so I still need to bring the diameter, the width of my waist. My abdomen, I need to bring that out, because if I go back and forth, you can see we lose some volume. So this is where, I'm battling with being authentic to the character. If I let that ride, then we would have a much smaller waisted character and we lose the authenticity. So that's a place, to be aware of that. And so I need to bring this out. Let's turn off X mirror. All right, let's try this. Okay, yeah, I'm maintaining my volume much better. And I actually really like how this all turns out. Like, it looks really good with the shirt collar, but I'm losing that detail of the coat, how it, hangs over on one side and the buttons, should be here. So I'm trying to think how to go about that. And while I'm thinking about it, I might not have time to figure that out this stream. And hopefully you're all getting the idea of what's going on. Is this landing with you guys? Like, is this making sense, the neutral process? Hopefully you're seeing that it's not that crazy. One thing I will do is I'm just going to cut all of this stuff off, because I cannot neutralize this. It would just be a huge pain to do that. So I'm just going to cut it off, and then it'll be much easier just to extrude some faces down to model that with polygons, and then leave it neutral for potential cloth simulation if I needed it. So I'm just going to cut that off real quick. Tab into edit mode and just select what I don't need. And then I'll go back and clean that. Well, maybe I don't need to clean it, actually. I just retopologize over it. Yeah, that cleans it up pretty nicely. Now let's bring back our hidden arm. And let's position that. Oops. I'm missing any questions. Oh, okay, so there is a question. Oh, this okay. So William, this is a perfect opportunity to request an anatomy for artists course. Have you seen Tim's anatomy 2D courses? Because you mentioned anatomy for artists, and that I've pointed people there before. It's quite applicable because like he talks about forming the shapes of the arm of anatomy in general, and that I think totally translates to 3D stuff. But maybe check that out in the meantime. And then yeah, maybe we'll anatomy has popped up several times before, so maybe we will have to do a dedicated course, for artists about that. So that's a good suggestion. Oh yeah, there are other questions. Other questions. The great. Okay, looks like you guys are having conversation, which is awesome. Mikal, Kent, once you asked on Twitter if anyone likes to watch tutorials for the fun of it. Well, that's basically why I'm here now. Okay, yeah. I think a reality that's starting to set in with me that I never understood before, and I think Omar, that's so hard for me to grasp tutorials for fun. Ever since I got into making tutorials and teaching online, teaching in general, teaching online, I've always done it assuming that people watching wanted to do this at a professional level, right? Like, has just always been my default posture and how I've taught. And then to realize maybe that a lot of people do this for fun. Like you almost watch tutorials for entertainment, the way people would watch a television show, or the way that I watch, or well, frankly, I watch other interests of mine, other hobbies. I watch tutorials for fun, having no intention to actually do what's in the tutorial, but learning about the process, picking up little tidbits, learning is entertaining. And so that's why I asked that. And so to hear that you're here for that reason, that's pretty cool, because like Mikala, you're here a lot, and I guess that you like being entertained by it a lot. And so I think that's cool. It's new to me. I wasn't aware that people would really do that, even though it makes sense. Anyway, that's why I asked it, because it does change. It could potentially change the way we teach. If people are here somewhat for entertainment value, like we want to, I don't know, we don't want to not give them that, but we also don't want to lose our identity of like teaching very professional things. So anyway, we're just weighing through that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's kind of why I asked that in the first place. I also like time lapses, William is saying. In fact, one of my untested ideas is that time lapses are more educational than tutorials. CG Cookie should really have some. So we do time lapses kind of a lot within courses. We try and teach, for example, like maybe if this were a tutorial today, I would have showed you how to neutralize the legs and the feet, and then I would have sped up the rest because it's the same kind of process. So we do that kind of stuff a lot, but it's interesting to think of like just doing time lapses like as a thing and releasing them. I don't know if you guys are into that. Maybe say, yeah, I'd love to, because like we could do that easily. Like it's not hard to do work and then share time lapses. It is a lot of work to teach a very thought out curriculum. But let me see. Sorry, I'm trying to catch up with the chat. I won't spend too much time here. I don't think. Question: What are your PC specs? Sorry if this is public knowledge. I'm amazed at how smooth your computer works with streaming and a Blender sculpt. Yeah, so I've got a 2013 Mac Pro. So at one time, at least, it was pretty cutting edge. But in today's standards, I don't think it's groundbreaking or anything. Like I don't even think my GPU works with cycles. It never has. But like my sculpture is not really that high resolution. I'm 667. Well, this whole time I've been under 1 million faces, so it's not really that heavy of a model. Sorry, I've really lost my train of thought with this stuff. Just centering my cursor to the arm and then my origin to the cursor so I can rotate this arm according to the joint. That's all I'm doing there. But yeah, that's the specs of my machine. It's done really well for me the past 4 years, coming up on 5 years. So it is it's been good for me, but I've had some issues with it as well. All right, so back to the arm. you know, that's pretty neutral. I will, that's not bad at all, actually. I do want to put, I'm going to put my origin right here at the elbow, my cursor rather, and then just kind of straighten out the arm a little bit. I do want there to be a bit of a bend. Oh, wow. Let me try it like that. Nope. Like that. I want it a little lower. Okay. All right, now I'm going to try and rotate with the 3D cursor just to straighten that out a touch. Yeah, just a little bit of cleanup to do. And, well, frankly, this brings up another topic, but look how much more neutral we're getting. We can add a mirror modifier to see the other side. Yeah, getting much more neutral. Maybe for now, let me just hide this, or duplicate it, Shift D, and then hide this. And I'm going to symmetrize this guy for the sake of like getting a general picture of the proportions that we're maintaining. There we go. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. I like it. And then we just need to put our head in masking position because those are already symmetrical for the most part. Like the head is symmetrical. I sculpted it symmetrically. The neck's a bit off kilter, but that's not a problem. Let's see. Actually, the head, I think I can just Alt. Yeah, I can Alt rotate, Alt G, and then just move it straight up. Okay. Then it's just a matter of putting the neck in proper position. Oh boy, what did I just do? What did I do? I'm not sure. All right. So select the bottom of the neck. We'll use, I think this might work well. And just trying to move this over in X so that it's straight up and down. I think I'm going to go this far and then switch to smoothing, or the smooth fall off. That looks pretty straight. And then finally, we'll go sharp. There we go. Oh, and then I need to go backward. Yeah, and this will, I'll start to wrap things up. See what that looks like. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. It's looking like a neutral version of our character, I think. Do you guys agree? Does it look like I'm maintaining? I think for the most part I'm maintaining the proportions. Maybe the head's sticking out a little bit far. Little bit of a giraffe neck. Okay. All right, I think I'm gonna let this sort of be it. Maybe put the hands in position. And the reason I duplicated that piece is I still want to figure out how to maintain this detail, the asymmetrical detail in the front, without having to re-sculpt it. So I'm just keeping that object around. I'm not sure how I want to do that quite yet, but I'm going to put the hand in position, and then talk about what my next steps will be. Also going to put the sword off. Oh, my character's not really in A pose either. I should put him in A pose. You know, where the hand is out here. I'll take a minute to do that. Let us put the cursor at the selection, basically at the shoulder joint. And trying to figure out the best way to do this. Kind of rotate the whole thing up. That's not the right way to do it. I think that's probably good. And then I'll just go back and address this with the sculpting tools. Simple enough. So really, what I'm trying to get you guys to see is that neutralizing, it's not that crazy of a thing. You know, there are some, you know, little quirky parts. Like basically what I think I'm going to do with this detail is try and kind of cut this piece out and then maybe Boolean it over top of this one to try and, you know, maintain some of that. And so that's really not a big hassle, but a little bit of sculpting cleanup. But ultimately, this is a pretty fair, a less painful process than maybe you guys thought initially. That was kind of the hope. And also, like how I learned professionally, it's worth it to get that character set really well at the beginning with the concept sculpt and get it approved by the director kind of idea. All right, mirror, and this is going to be the finish. All right, so that's what I'm stopping the stream here. We've neutralized our character about 50%, but we want to go in and fix the over symmetry involved, especially in the torso area, all the wrinkles. Maybe clear out the wrinkles. Decide. Yeah, so let's talk about what I need to do next. I need to decide where to model the wrinkles in and where to like smooth it out. Decide if I want to do cloth sim, if I want to build the model that is possible with that. I think, you know, I need to remove most of the wrinkles because those came from the arm being bent and now it's not bent anymore, so that doesn't make any sense. But at the same time, if I want to maintain the wrinkles, you know, if done correctly, done carefully, you can animate with wrinkles pre-made into the character and just with skins and rigging and bones and rigging. And it turns out fine and you don't need cloth sim. But anyway, these are kind of things I need to wrap my head around. And once I address those, touch up the sculpture, then it's just a matter of retopology. And we have a ton of retopology content on our site for characters even specifically. So some of those are what you are assigned to watch this week. But just going to check one more time, see if I'm missing any last questions. Question, what are your PC specs? I answered that one. I think he uses a Mac, which makes it even more amazing. I really, really hate Macs. I mean more like entire scenes that are 100% time lapse. Yeah. I mean, I used to be a pretty big Mac fan, Apple fan in general. I kind of think they've lost their way a little bit with Steve Jobs out of the picture. But so anyway, I don't know. Yeah. Mac versus PC, you know, people can have that discussion. It's fine. Okay, yeah, so, okay, that's great. So, Marjoline, I agree that apparently Ryan said this, sitting through a live demo is gold. A lot of extra raw info in the raw demo. Yeah, and this is completely raw, that's for sure. But problem solving, yeah, that's a big part of computer graphics. And I hope that as you watch me go through it, people are learning about the problem solving, but I understand sometimes it can be boring. But I'm glad to hear at least some of you are thinking that. Question, could you do the mirror desired faces of the coat in edit mode and preserve the front buttons? Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I think you might have asked that before I answered, sort of. But yeah, I'm going to try and keep the asymmetry of the, I guess, what do you call this? The it's not lapel, but the button portion. Yeah, I am going to try and keep that in there. Worst case scenario, I have to re-sculpt it, and like that's going to take like 5 minutes. Big deal. But another reason to not like Mac, and that's totally valid. Totally valid. I used to default to Macs, but I would look elsewhere at this point until they start taking artists seriously again. Macs are kind of not the go-to for me anymore. Question: can you do Control plus M to mirror in the X-axis? Let me see. You mean in Control M? Oh, look at that. I've never known that. I didn't know Control M was a mirror modifier. Yo, look at that. Interactive mirror, Control M. Omar, you've taught me something new. Never known that. I always just scale. I wonder if it Control M, X, enter. Can we? Oh, the only negative part of that is it doesn't automatically fix the normals. So, bummer. If it did that, that would be my new go-to. But as it is, you still have to Control N to fix the faces. But so in that way, it's kind of the same as hitting SX -1 in edit mode. Anyway, that's pretty cool. I never knew that tool was there. Could you? Has the video been cutting in and out? I apologize if the connection has been bad. But you asked that 14 minutes ago. Man, I'm sorry. I'm not sure what I was talking about, but if you can remind me what I was saying when I was cutting out, I'd like to clarify that for sure. All right, is that caught up? What is SIGGRAPH? SIGGRAPH is the biggest special. Oh wow, there's a special interest group for computer graphics under the Association of Computer Machinery. It's basically the biggest computer graphics conference that I'm aware of. It's just the big conference. All right. Okay, so I think I've caught up. Go Linux. Man, I want to love Linux so much, and I've tried probably half dozen times trying to go to Linux, like really committing to it. And I'm only ever able to use it as like a utility operating system. I've never liked the manual part of Linux. That it drives me a little bit insane. Little bit the Mac and PC, prejudice stuff. I like these subtle little jabs and whatnot. That's funny. I hope we're all friends in here. This was the first stream that I've ever seen a little bit of drama kind of come out. So I hope everybody's cool. I hope we're all in here and we're friends. But whether you're PC or you're Mac, we're all friends. We're all using computers, right? Blender unites us regardless of operating system. Anyway, maybe one day I can go to Linux 100%, but it's a bit of too big of a commitment at this point. So anyway, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate you watching the stream. I hope it was helpful. And if you decide to neutralize and retopologize your character, then, one day that can be animated. And that's a pretty cool thing. That is the whole reason you do it. If you want to just sculpt, make that thing polished and super impressive. And that's kind of what I'll be grading on is like, I saw week 2's sculpture. Week 3 better be like, real nice. Getting another week to work on it. But so do that this week. I'll see you in the thread. Thank you for watching again. It's fun as always. So class is dismissed for today. So have a good one.